Closer burnout is a scam. If you don't know who I am, my name is Josh Lyons, and as a high-ticket closer, I went from $0 to earning over $100,000 per month in commissions. I did that within 17 months since taking my first sales call. And I then went on to train some of the top sales teams in the industry, like Alex Hormozi's old gym launch sales team. And in this video, you're going to see me work one-on-one with one of the students of the Unicorn Closer Mastermind to show her why she thought she had burnout, but it was actually a total fucking scam. What actually causes that feeling of burnout, and by showing her what actually causes it, you'll see me show her how to solve it so she never has to face closer burnout ever again. These students invest a minimum of $12,000 each to get access to me and to get access to my underground mentor, who's the guy responsible for teaching me everything that I know about sales that allowed me to earn over $100,000 a month in commissions. Here's the thing. Most salespeople think that after they've been in sales for a few months or a few years, burnout is just part of the program. It's just an inevitable piece of being a salesperson. You know, every few months, you spend a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months where you're just not on top form. In fact, you're probably on your worst form ever. And that is just seen as inevitable. And if you believe that that's inevitable, or you don't watch this training to see that it's not part of the program, it's a choice that you're making because you've not had a mentor show you, like I had, that it's a complete fucking scam, then you will continue to flush tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of commissions down the toilet every single year. If you don't want to keep flushing that tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of commission down the toilet every single year, then watch this video until the end and I'll show you that closer burnout is a total fucking scam and how to fix it so you never have to keep losing that money. Because listen, if you want to become the top 0.0001% of salespeople, you don't just need sales tactics, you also need the internal mastery. Internal mastery plus the highest form of selling, which is scriptless selling, those two things combined will allow you to become what we call a unicorn closer, which is someone who is able to use sales to make a lot of fucking money whilst also becoming the best version of themselves simultaneously so that they can live the life of their dreams. So without any further ado, let's crack in to Closer Burnout is a Scam. What's going on, Melek? How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Josh?
I'm
So
doing
excited.
very good. I'm doing awesome.
Tell me
All
why
right.
don't Tell
How
me.
can I help you?
Okay. So I reflected on my biggest challenge in sales. There's one more technical. I believe that's more important for me to sort out right now, and another one is more internal.
Mhm.
But the technical one is basically I struggle with getting full commitment from the prospect, meaning, at least 4 to 5 deals every single month, Josh, does not close on the call for me, but closes like after 24 to 48 hours. And the most common objection I get is I need to think about it. And actually, when I dig layers deeper, I feel like the root of this is because I struggle with the prospect archetype and the nature of my offer. It's boutique hotel investing. I hop on calls with full-time investors. And generally, what brings me to sale is like conversations like, okay, I invest in apartment buildings. If I get into boutique hotels, it's going to be a way to diversify and I can get 2% higher cash on cash returns. So when conversations are like that, I don't ask commitment questions. Okay, how much longer are you at a point? I don't do the double tie downs, things like that. It's not like, a fitness offer, somebody crying about how they hate the way they look. So, I mean, this is important for me to sort out because I'm not married to my offer. I mean, I can drop the offer, but I can see myself, even if I end up securing a similar offer with, full-time investors or a higher level prospect archetype, BizOp, investment opportunity, even the one that you have experience with, for example, crypto mastermind, something along those lines. I can see myself, limiting myself. Oh my God, does these guys even have a burning, flaming problem? They're hyper aware of the sales process. I don't want to, increase the sales resistance, things like that.
Okay, got it. So the main reason that they usually buy with this archetype that you're struggling with is 2% cash difference if they made an investment into the boutique hotels?
Yeah, generally something I observed, it's always small shifts. It's not necessarily solving an incredibly, pressing matter for them. It's metrics make sense. For example, I recently lost a deal where the guy was talking about how he's about to exit his business, but he doesn't want to fully, retire from the business world, and he believes boutique hotels would be a good way to mix business and pleasure. I'm like, it's not a pressing matter, but technically you have money, technically you're qualified, but he didn't end up buying, for example.
And so when he says he wants to mix business and pleasure, is he saying that the boutique hotels is business or it's pleasure?
Both, like boutique hotels, it's fun, it's also vacation. He can own the business, be a real estate investor, but also have a hotel to enjoy, by the beach.
Okay. Okay. And so then did you clarify like how much he would need to invest and what his returns would be? And if that was something that he agrees to, like if you give me 100 grand, we'll be able to make you 500 grand. Did you clarify those numbers with him?
Yeah, I did clarify the metrics, but eventually, even afterwards, he was like, like I'm not in a rush. I'm still in process of selling my business, so we'll see where it goes. I mean, he's one specific example, but I observed in general, people are after these small shifts. They're not telling me like, hey, actually, you know what, my life depends on it. It's not major.
And how many times do you sell people that do just want those small shifts?
Very often, I would say honestly,
Okay.
80% of my deals close like that.
Okay. And what would that, because when you say a small shift, it might be a small shift in percentage, but how much cash difference would that be to someone over a 2 year period?
Yeah, over a 2 year period, it's actually a significant amount. There's like significant amount of money on the table, like depending on how much they put on, of
Hmm.
course. But 2% returns can of course be major, but still they don't see it as pressing, I guess. And I don't know if it's also my belief too, right?
That's
It's
what
not.
I'm wondering.
Mm.
Why do you say that 2% is small if that could be $500,000 to someone in a year?
Yeah, you're right. It can be actually maybe because we're having those conversations from a point of, yeah, it would be nice to have, or they're not currently in a painful situation. They're just like, oh, it's what ifs can be better. Yeah, of course it would be better for me to have 500,000 extra right now, but it's not coming from this place of, okay, I have to make a change, or me asking how much longer, all those things.
Well, it would come from, so let's say the difference was 500,000. They go into boutique hotels and the difference with the 2% is 500,000. What you then need to tie down is what other variables like time and effort and it being a different industry for them would they need to have clarity on to then be able to justify whether that $500,000 is enough. What I mean by that is $500,000 could be good or it could be bad. It depends how much time they need to put in. It depends what they know or what they think they know or what they think they like about the hotel industry and all of those other different variables. Because once you've got them to a point where they said, yes, $500,000 for an extra 5 hours a month of my time and taking the money out of my stocks or out of my real estate and putting it into this, they tell you that is absolutely something that I want to do. Once they've tied down all of the potential objections logistically, the time and things like that, then your how much longer question is so, with everything being aligned, the time, the industry, blah, 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 how much longer do you want to leave another $500,000 a year on the table?
Okay.
And if you're saying to them, how much longer do you want to leave $500,000 a year on the table? The only objections they could give you would be things that you should have already covered. Like, well, I'm not sure about hotels, or, well, I'm not sure about the time it's going to take, or I'm not sure about, the tax implications, or whatever else. So long as you've covered all of those things, the only thing that they're deciding between is 500,000 more a year or 500,000 less a year. And that would be how you would get them to make a decision right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And Josh, I remember a few weeks ago you talking about, we have to also dig into their personal story. When you said that, that was a big light bulb moment for me because I'm hopping on these calls and talking a bunch of metrics, numbers, but I don't really get to know them on a personal level.
Mm.
But I guess I have this limiting belief, if I hop on a call with a full-time investor and they talk to me about like scaling this, that, like sort of, trying to shift the conversation to more personal matters, their family, things like that. Again, I don't know if it's gonna come off unnatural. I don't want to put them off, you know what I mean? I feel like
Okay,
that's
well,
a challenge too.
okay. How are you doing on your offer? Like, how's it going in general? Are you crushing it? Are you making loads of money? Are you doing really well, or are you thinking, or are you feeling that you're not doing that well? Where are you at currently with what you're doing as far as the way you're trying to sell right now?
Yeah, I'm closing at a 60% rate right now. I'm
Okay,
not so
that's
happy
good.
with my, in terms of finances because lead volume is like up and down. Like for example,
Okay.
today I didn't have any calls. But one thing that makes me uncomfortable is like, okay, I'm having these calls, but I don't feel like it's out of like me performing so greatly. It's generally little shifts or they hop off the calls and then afterwards, like 24 to 48 hours later, they close like end up, closing. So I don't feel like, okay, actually, you know what, like I dig so deep, I get great emotion, and I tie them down. So I feel a bit imposter about it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, you shouldn't feel imposter if you're closing at 60%, but the 24 to 48 hours follow-up bit, that could
Yeah.
make sense. When they say they need to think about it and then they do come back 24 hours later or 48 hours later, what is it that they've done over those 24 to 48 hours that got them over the line?
Just digesting, doing a bit further due diligence on boutique hotels and, possibly checking out if they were considering another asset class too, actually making this firm decision, okay, you know what, like I'm not going to pursue, let's say, self-storage. I'm all in on boutique hotels. It's just like extra digestion, to be honest, like nothing should
And
be, in my opinion, like that should be delayed actually.
and so when they're digesting the differences between the asset classes, you mean like what percentages they would get in hotels versus something else they're comparing? Or what are they digesting?
Yeah, just confirming the metrics. To be honest, I don't want to buy into that whole, okay, actually you should take 24 hours more because I don't think they're again, like I don't think they're doing anything major. It's just last confirmations, okay, just I guess like drawing a sand in the line, okay, I'm all in now, but they just won't do it on the call.
But are you asking them specifically what they're going to do over the next 24 to 48 hours? When they say digest the information, what does that mean?
Yeah, I do ask, but also I guess because in my discovery I don't get into such personal matters. I also don't want to be like suddenly extra, hey, yeah, where are you going? This, that, I feel a bit of incongruency in that way too. Again, like you talked about conditioning, I feel like our conversations are very much detached from my side, discussing metrics. So at the end, when they say I need to digest, I can't immediately get into emotions or try to hold them super strong because since from the start I was very much like practical.
Yeah, it can be practical. And so, just to be clear, like let's say the difference is $500,000 of how much money they would make extra. I'm not saying at the end of the call when they say, I need to digest it, you say, well, tell me about your feelings or tell me about where you're going on holiday or anything like that. What I'm saying is it can still be very logical, $500,000, but what do they need to digest about the $500,000? Is it that they genuinely didn't know the returns that they would get from one of the other asset classes, in which case you should have flushed that out in the discovery that they don't actually know what percentages returns they would get in another asset class. So I don't want you to get confused thinking
Mm.
the sale needs to be emotional or about someone's personal life. It needs to be emotional in the sense of what they're leaving on the table is significant. For an investor that's full time, it might just be the fact that it's $500,000. That's a pretty significant chunk of money that they should feel pretty emotional about if they don't make a decision right now. And so when they say at the end of the call, I need to digest it, I'm still not clear what is it about the 500 or whatever the money is that they're losing that they need to digest. If you've actually shown them how much money they'll lose, there shouldn't really be any digesting necessary.
Yeah, I know I should actually like get extra clear on that. But also again, I guess ties back to my challenge with the prospect archetype because they're super hyper aware of sales process. I don't want them to think like, okay, she's objection handling right now, so I'm trying to keep it more chilled, but I can still ask for maximal clarity.
Yes. And ideally, you do all of this in the discovery before the end of the call. So when they say, I'm looking at boutique hotels, okay, cool. What are the variables you're looking for? Okay, got it. What percentage returns are you looking at with the other asset classes that you're looking at as options? How much money are you looking to multiply? What are the variables in terms of time that you'd like to put in? What experience do you have with different asset classes? Why, if you do you want to get into a completely new asset class that you don't have experience with? And once you gather all of the data about what they've done in the past, boutique hotels, and what their future options are, like the other options they have available, because you've done it in the discovery, it's like, how can they say that they need to digest something when they've told you all of the information? I've got three options: real estate, hotels, or crypto. Okay. What's your returns on crypto and real estate? Oh, it would be 10%. Well, boutique hotels is 20%. So if you, and I'm simplifying it, but if you laid it out for them like that, what are they? So are you telling me, Mr. Prospect, that you're digesting whether you would rather a 10% return instead of a 20%? You see how silly it looks.
Yeah, it is
You've
a
got
number.
you've got to lay out all of their options though.
Yeah.
And so when they say I'm just looking into boutique hotels, yeah, cool, that's not an issue at all. What else are you looking at? I'm looking at real estate, crypto, and stocks. Okay, cool. What experience have you got with any of them? None. Okay. How much time and effort do you know you need to put into each of them? Well, real estate's a lot of time, crypto is a middle amount of time, and stocks is zero time. You just put the money in and leave it. Okay, cool. What else? What percentage returns are you looking at? Real estate would be 10%, crypto would be 5%, and stocks would be 12%. Okay, cool. And then when you've laid that all out to them, and you then go through your pitch and you show them that boutique hotels are better in every way, what are they digesting?
Yeah. Yeah,
Does
that
that,
makes.
are you doing that on your calls? Are you laying out all of their different options with them and going into the details of?
I don't think I get, yeah, I haven't been getting like extra clear. I asked them, okay, which metrics are important to you? But we don't get like super clear on certain things. And also when they say they have so many investments, also like when I'm initially first portion of the call, when I'm collecting data, if they tell me they have 8 apartment buildings, 5 Airbnbs, I actually don't dig into each of one of them. Like, would you advise me to do so?
100%. How can
That's a
you,
lot of asset classes to dig into.
sorry?
Like, let's say if they have 14, 15 investments, right? Apartment buildings, Airbnbs, every single one of them, should I ask?
Well, you want to try and categorize them a little bit. So let's say they had crypto, real estate, and stocks. You want to get a ballpark percentage of what their returns are on each of those. Then you want to get a ballpark how much time and effort they put into each of those. Then you want to get a ballpark of how they're going. In other words, are they what you would call turbulent? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? Are they flatlined? Like, how's it going? So, over the last few years, how has your real estate investment gone in terms of, going up, going down, a bit turbulent, things like that? And they'll say, well, the returns have been really good in terms of a high number, 20%, but it's been really up and down and it's been very stressful. How do you mean by stressful? Well, I keep having to move the money from one portfolio to another or one property to another and blah, 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 blah. Okay, and who does that? Oh, I have to deal with my real estate manager and they deal with that, blah, blah, blah. Now they're telling you the story of how their real estate investing is going. You do the same for crypto, you do the same for stocks, and then you would compare that with the prospect to boutique hotels. And then if the boutique hotel investing looks better than what they're doing, then you just say to them, okay, so are we on the same page that this is going to be less time for more money with less stress? Yes. Okay, cool. So how much longer do you want to leave that liquid capital or that capital in the stocks that is causing you more stress, more time, and less returns? How much longer do you want to keep it in there instead of moving it over to boutique hotels where you're going to make more money in less time with less stress? And then
Yeah.
now you're asking them to make a commitment. Are they going to make a decision now because you've laid it out for them very clearly? It's not getting into the pain and the emotions of their family and their children unless it comes up, but it is the pain of the fact they've got a opportunity cost to move the money into a better asset class. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And that way it would be much more powerful. And also, Josh, I know like you started off with dating offer and it was a more like affluent prospect archetype, but still, of course, like those conversations are much more intimate. Then you shifted to crypto, right? Like, did you have any like certain differences in terms of your approach apart from what you just mentioned in regards to the opportunity cost there?
It might sound different that the conversations that we're having were different. You know, one's about money, one's about dating, but the principles are the same. The principles are I need to get to the truth of what's really going on, the actual facts, and then ask the person, are they committed to making a change? If the facts of crypto is someone has a job, they have real estate investing, they don't like their job, their real estate investing is not going very well, therefore they want to get into crypto. So long as I've got all the facts and the details of those two things, that's what I need to make the sale. It's no different to a dating sale. How many dates did they go on? How did they go? How did they rate the women? What are they looking for as far as an outcome of their dating life? I just need the facts. It doesn't matter whether it's fitness, dating, crypto. You need all the details so that you can present to the prospect, this is what you're doing right now. It's not working in this way, or it could be better in this way. This is the alternative. Which one of these two options do you choose? Continuing with what you're doing or moving over to this option? Okay, cool. Why do you want to move over to that option? Makes total sense. I'll walk you through all the details and then we'll put it on a Visa, MasterCard, Amex, or a Discover. And that's it. Is that clear,
Yeah.
Malik?
Yeah, it is. I think I've been viewing boutique hotels as this like luxury. It's a nice to have. It's a vacation, real estate slash, and I think that's been really coming off the way I've been asking questions and running discovery as well. Like I haven't been, okay, seriously, we have to get into specifics, make like flush out all the metrics and just make it a no-brainer.
Well, what is it that's a nice to have as far as, you know, not urgent? If someone is currently putting their money in investments that would make them less $500,000 less a year, that's not a nice to have. That's pretty urgent. It's like I better move the money around pretty quick.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess prospects have been hopping on calls like, oh, boutique hotels is much more fun than self-storage, so that's why I want to get into boutique hotels, and I figured it has higher returns. So because I had so many of those conversations, I started being like, okay, I guess it's not a life-changing opportunity, but it can absolutely be actually.
Well, the two things for that then would be what is not fun about self-storage. Because when someone's a full-time investor or any type of serious investor and they say, the reason I want this investment is because it's more fun, that's bullshit investing. That's not how you invest. You would invest in something that's less not fun. In other words, if what you're doing currently is really boring, stressful, annoying, frustrating, sure, you'll move into something different, but you wouldn't choose to move into a new investment just because it's fun. Because fun in what way? If you're an investor, you put the money in and you don't do anything. You don't go to the hotel and like, you know, choose the paint colors and choose the furniture, and you're not a developer. You're an investor. You just put the money in and someone else does everything for you basically. So fun is not a metric, but the returns, well, if someone says I think it's higher percentage, what is their current percentage on self storage and what does that turn into in cash, and then compare that to what it would be in hotels and show them the opportunity cost of not moving that money over. Another thing as far as getting someone to buy right now is where is their current money? Is it liquid or is it in an investment? Is it in the self storage? Because if it's in the self storage, then you need to ask them to explain to you what the process would be once they do find a better vehicle for them to move the money out of the self storage and put it into the different vehicle. They might say, oh, it takes a week or it takes 2 weeks. Well, then you can't close someone on a one call close because logistically the money is not available. It's in a different vehicle. So that's
Mm,
one of the other things that I need logically to tie down.
yeah.
Where is the capital?
Yeah, I've been sort of sleeping on that too because I always thought, okay, you know what, this is just a mentorship fee. You figure out the funding and the, liquidity for to be able to secure the boutique hotel property later on. Just just get your foot in the door. But that's also popped up actually. Hey, like I don't have any liquidity. I have to move money around.
Well, yeah, it depends if they're because like you clarified there, it depends if they're referring to liquidity for the training or
Yeah.
liquidity for the hotels. If they're referring to liquidity for the hotels, then it sounds like, are you saying you help them find investment, or no, it has to be their money that they're investing into the hotel?
Yeah, it has to be their money, but they
Okay.
get guidance in regards to funding, of course.
They get
Like
what?
they get guidance in regards to funding, how to structure the deal, raising capital, finding lenders. Those are options as well.
Okay. Okay. So it's not the prospect's money. They're getting investors to put the money into the boutique hotel.
Yeah, they can leverage creative financing as well. That's a very common scenario.
Okay, so then what you need to uncover in the discovery is which one of those options are they already decided on, so that at the end of the call, they can't throw you the curveball and say, "Oh, well, I don't have the money."
Yeah.
Because if in the discovery you've got them to tell you, "I don't want to invest my money, I want to do creative financing," then at the end of the call, they can't say, "I don't have the money," because they've already told you it's not going to be their money, it's going to be the creative financing, which the training program helps them do that. The key thing, Melek, is you have to uncover more things in the discovery, because if you do it in the discovery, people can't give it to you as an objection. If you kind of miss something, then they'll try throwing it as a curveball as an objection. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this has been super helpful.
Yeah. So if I was running a call with you, and I won't do the whole call, but just to kind of give you some key pointers, I would first get into, what's the biggest reason that you want to get into boutique hotel investing right now? And they tell you returns. Okay. And you say, okay, cool. So you want to have better returns, it sounds, than what you've got right now. Correct? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's get into your current investments. What have you got right now? And they say crypto, real estate, and stocks. You say, okay, cool. So in terms of crypto, how much money have you put into crypto? I've put in 50K. Okay. And when did you put that in? I put that in 3 years ago. Okay. Got it. And what is that portfolio valued at now? It's now 1.5 million. Okay. Got it. And are you doing anything with that money to multiply it further? No, I'm just holding it and obviously seeing whether it goes up or down. Okay, cool. So put in 50K. 3 years later, that's turned into 1.5 million. So that's a 30x in 3 years. Is that clear? Yes, cool. In terms of your crypto, what are you doing on a weekly basis as far as time and effort in terms of managing that investment? Oh, I don't do anything. I just leave it there. Okay. Do you look at it? No, I look at it probably once a month. Okay. For about an hour. Yep. Makes sense. Okay. So you've got crypto investing. You put in 50K over 3 years. It's 30x. It's now worth 1.5 million. And you don't do anything with it as far as time. It's just sitting there holding, potentially going up, potentially going down, but really just holding it. Is that correct? Yes. Cool. Let's get into the real estate. What have you got in terms of real estate? How much did you put in? Well, I put in 150,000. Okay, you put in 150K over what time period? Oh, that was also 3 years. Okay, got it. That was 3 years. And what have been your returns? Do you have monthly returns? Do you have capital gains? I have monthly returns. I get cash flow. Okay, cool. What is your monthly cash flow from that? I make $2,000 a month. Okay, cool. So in a year, you make $24,000 in terms of profit on the real estate. Is that correct? Yes. You probably then need to calculate that as far as a percentage. I don't have my calculator up, but you'd get a percentage. And then you'd say, in terms of the time and effort that you put into that, how much time and effort do you put into real estate? And he says, I probably spend 10 hours a week. Okay, so you spend 10 hours a week on that. And then stocks, how much have you put in? I put in 20,000 10 years ago, and it's now worth 100,000. Okay, so that's 5x over 10 years. You got 5x, 10 years, and how much time and effort do you put into that? Oh, I don't put any hours into that. Okay, so now you've got their whole situation. Then you're able to compare that to boutique hotels. And if the boutique hotels is less time, better returns, shorter time period as far as how quickly they would get those returns, then you're able to present that to them and say, okay, cool. So with boutique hotels, you would make a lot more than the real estate, and you'd make a lot more than the stocks. You'd probably not make more than the crypto, but obviously that was a high risk investment. So knowing that with boutique hotels, and I'll just make up the numbers. Let's say with real estate, their returns were 10% a year. With boutique hotels, you would make 15%. So what I'm curious about, Melek, is knowing that you would make, 1.5 times as much money with boutique hotels, how much capital would you be looking to allocate out of your real estate or your stocks and put it into boutique hotels? Oh, I'd be looking to take out 200,000. Okay, cool. 200,000. And so with that 200,000, instead of that being a 10% return, it would now be a 15% return. So 10% of that would be, 20,000. 15% of that would be 30,000. So you would make an extra $10,000 from moving that money over to the boutique hotels. Does that make sense? Yes. It's not a good example because the number's so small, but you would then say at the end of the call, so how much longer do you want to lose $10,000 a year, keeping that $200,000 in the stocks or in the real estate? I don't want to lose that money any longer. But in order to get there, I have to get all the data on their investments. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And this also made me realize how I've been really rushing the process. Like I've been impatient and rushing the entire process.
Well,
That's why
you're doing
I
60%
never got
anyway,
as
so.
yeah, but still it could obviously absolutely be much better. And I never got like that granular.
And another thing that's interesting that you said is a part of it, you didn't come to this call saying, hey, Josh, I'm not making any money. I need to fix it so I make more money. What you said was something like, I don't really feel that fulfilled with my calls because I feel like I'm kind of imposter syndrome. I'm doing 60%, but I don't really feel like I'm running a masterful discovery. I would be very curious how you feel without getting prospects into pain or without getting prospects into emotions, but just getting more granular. If you start closing people having been more thorough and done a more professional job, you may find that you lose that bad feeling of like imposter syndrome, not feeling fulfilled with the calls, the closes, just because you're now actually doing a more thorough discovery. And you'll feel like, oh, I closed them. I actually did my job and I closed them because I got all the data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that could be a big shift for me because time to time, like very rarely, I would get some emotional prospects, emotional calls, and I'm like, wow, like I try with these calls. For example, last month I lost one deal, although I felt like I've done a good job. I really got to know them on a personal level, all those things. But I still felt like fulfilled even afterwards, like that they didn't end up buying, but I still felt good about it. I think you're so right. Like once I get more granular about my discovery, I would also feel more fulfilled.
Yep. Process focused, not outcome attached.
Oh my God, that was literally the internal aspect that I wanted to talk to you about.
How
This is
so?
so
What
good.
do you want to talk about with that?
Yeah, because beginning of the call, I mentioned, okay, I have one technical challenge, one internal, and that was the internal one that I struggle with internalizing. Because I feel like Josh, like we're trying to be a specialist, right? I'm trying to lock it in, like master sales, dedicate my time, like fully committed. How can I not be attached to the outcome if I'm not treating this like a hobby? I'm really struggling with that aspect.
I didn't understand. How can you not be attached to the outcome if you're not treating it like a hobby? What? Sorry, I didn't understand.
I feel like because this is all I care about right now, this is all, I'm locked in, I'm making so much time and like put so much energy into sales, then I hold myself to a really high standard and I'm attached to the outcome. Like I struggle with internalizing that principle of, don't be attached to the outcome. I am attached.
Well, I think another thing to remember is they are connected, meaning if you do attach to the process, in the big picture, you'll get great outcomes. The reason we have this phrase of process focused, not outcome attached, is there are some bad days, or there are some bad calls, or there are some random events that we can't control. And if those random things happen and we're focused to the outcome in any specific moment, we'll get down, we'll feel depressed. But if you realize that so long as you're attached to the process call by call, day by day, week by week, it doesn't matter if you have a few small bad days or bad calls, your monthly commissions will be very big.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I'm good with, understanding of course there's going to be elements of randomness. Like I don't feel bummed. Like for example, today I didn't have any calls. It was weird.
Sure.
Or if I have, like if when I get an unqualified prospect, no problem with that. But when I feel like, oh dang, like I'm not performing as well as I should be, my calls, like it's not that deep, my discoveries, things like that, then I'm harsh on myself.
Yeah, but
Or
that's process focused. That's
okay.
not outcome focused. That's process focused.
Oh, really?
Well,
How
yeah,
come?
because
Like being
the
attached, okay, like I'm not doing well, I'm not getting the results.
well, that was different. You said I'm not doing well and I'm not getting the results. Process focused is focusing on what you're doing, not what you're getting as a result. So if you're looking at your calls and thinking, I'm not going deep enough in the discovery, I'm not showing up the right way, I'm not gathering the data, etc., then that's process focused. That's not outcome focused. That's the
Okay.
process. The outcome is if you ran a perfect call that you're very proud of, but it didn't close, and then you're like, I feel shit because it didn't close. That would be outcome focused.
Okay,
But
I'm very good.
if you're looking at your calls and thinking I could be doing better on the call, then that's process focused. Now, obviously, if you don't do well on the call, the outcome will also be bad. That's why I said they're connected. But if you do the right thing and you get a bad result and you're bothered about that, that is because you're outcome focused. But if you're bothered about not doing the right things as the inputs, then that's process focused.
Okay. Then I guess okay, I am process focused, but when I see myself not doing well, I'm super harsh on myself. And again, I'm rushing this aspect too because obviously, like I started sales still like relatively recently here at UCM, and initially I was like, okay, this is just my first month, second month, but now I'm like, okay, I'm heading towards my fifth month. Now I should be doing much better. So I think, okay, I am process focused, but I'm incredibly harsh on myself in that aspect. Like with that whole concept of being process focused, I'm very harsh on myself.
And what are the results of you being harsh on yourself in terms of what does that cause you to do?
Like I feel very down, and initially I know like when I first started sales I was really having fun. Initially I started closing a super low ticket offer. Anytime I make a sale I would be like buzzing. I was overall like just a more happy, enthusiastic person. Now I feel like, okay, this was a split pay, it's not a win, on to the next. Like I'm a bit more serious, and like I feel like I'm not playing the game, I'm more being a boring adult, I guess.
Well, they're different things that you're saying, so we'll try and unpack it because not having fun, that's one thing, that's very clear. Being harsh on yourself, my question was what is that doing to you? Because if we're very harsh on ourselves and by being harsh on ourselves, we do more training and we do more call reviews and we hop on training with our mentors, well, that being harsh on yourself is having a positive outcome, which is it's pushing you to do things. If you're being harsh on yourself and then you stop turning up to live calls and you stop asking questions and you stop trying to get better, then it's negative. So the question I asked you was so that I can understand. I don't really care whether you're harsh on yourself. What I care about is it serving you? Is it serving you to get better? And obviously, also with things, it's not yes or no, it's a spectrum. Meaning, if I draw this on the screen, if I do this is the scale of, we'll call it the scale of being harsh on myself, harsh on myself. Okay. So this is you're not being harsh on yourself. And this is your 100 out of 10. Okay. Now, what we need to understand is this is an input. Okay. And it has a reflective scale, which is the output, the result of it. In other words, there are certain people, and so we'll call this scale down here positive positive slash serving me outcomes. Okay, so this will make sense in a minute. Outcomes. Okay, so people that are not very harsh on themselves, in other words, they don't tell themselves at all that they're not good enough, that they need to get better, etc. What is the result of that? If they're over here, the result of that is they don't do any work. They don't challenge themselves, they don't push, they don't train, they don't go to the gym, they don't align themselves with a mentor. As you go further and further along the harshness scale, and you get to say a 50 out of 100, what happens? The positive serving outcome comes down to about here, and they start deciding they need training, they need a mentor, they need things like that, etc. However, what happens when they get all the way up to 90? It does this, and it goes back over here. In other words, you're being too harsh on yourself, that it's putting you into guilt and shame and apathy and negativity, etc., etc., etc. So when I asked you, how harsh on yourself are you being? I don't really care where you are here, 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 here. What I care about is, where are you on this scale? What impact is it having? Is it pushing you to do a good amount of training with a good mindset that you're committed to getting better? Is it pushing you to do no training or less training because you're beating yourself up? Or is it pushing you to do lots of training from the wrong state? In other words, you're doing training because you're angry with yourself and you're annoyed with yourself and you feel bad about yourself. What matters is, what is the outcome as far as how it's turning into action? Does that make sense, Malik?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And
And
so yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, I had to hear this from you. Honestly, I'm glad we're having a chat about this. I feel like now, lately, I've been so harsh on myself that now I'm like, you know what, I need a break. Like I want to do nothing right now. I'm exhausted. So now I don't think it's serving me at all
Okay,
because I
good. So,
felt.
so then we're clear that you've gone too
Yeah.
far into this way. But what you need to realize is that when we talk, just like prospects, when we use generalizations, we're not being granular enough to really understand the facts. Let me explain that. You said something like, being harsh on myself, and I'm paraphrasing, you didn't say it like this, but what you were saying is, I think that being harsh on myself is a bad thing. And
Yeah.
what I needed you to realize was, well, it's not good or bad. It depends. It depends the specifics of where you are on the scale and what the result is as far as this impact. So, what people do when they screw things up is they come into life and they're being harsh on themselves, and they be more harsh on themselves, and they be more harsh on themselves, and they be more harsh on themselves and more harsh. And the result of that is, it gets them to take more action and more action and more action and more action and more action until they reach what we would call like a breaking point, where they're even more harsh on themselves. But because they've passed this breaking point, it brings them all the way back down to a worse position. And then what they do is they say, oh, the problem is being harsh on yourself. No, 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 no. The problem is, how harsh on yourself are you being? You can't just universally say, never be harsh on yourself. That's a bad thing. Fuck that. That's terrible. I'm never going to do that ever again. And that's what people do. And so what they end up doing is they end up being on what's called the pendulum, where they swing all the way one side and then all the way the other side and then all the way back this side and then all the way back this side. And what you need to realize by asking questions, which is why I asked this question to get to this point, is, where would be the sweet spot? Where would be this sweet spot where it's a good amount of being harsh on yourself, but it's not too much being harsh on yourself? Because usually what people do is they push far too far in one direction and it creates a rebound effect. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? It's no
Yeah.
different to diet. It's like, if someone, and this is why people do yo-yo dieting, where they go up in weight and down in weight and up in weight and down in weight, is they will put on weight and then they'll say, I need to go on a diet, and they'll go on a really extreme diet, and then it will cause them to feel bad about themselves. They can't eat the foods they like, etc. So then what they do is, instead of saying, so this would be diet, instead of saying, you know what, the problem was I went too far on the diet, I just need to come back a little bit, They say, oh, dieting is a problem. The whole universal concept of dieting is bad. And so then what they do is they stop counting their calories, they stop focusing on eating the right foods, and they put on all the weight again. The issue isn't dieting, the issue is you just went a little bit too far.
Yeah.
And that's why people put on weight and then lose weight and then put on weight and then lose weight. And they just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So what you need to find is where is the sweet spot for you of being harsh on yourself that it pushed you to do more work, to do more work, to do more training, to do more mentorship. But what was that breaking point? And then your ideal is you want to be like here. You want to be at the place where it serves you the most, that it can. So you do the most amount of training, but not to the point where you're not having fun, you're burned out, and you want to go back and do nothing. Does that make sense, Malik?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel?
Yeah, honestly, at one point I got emotional because it's exactly what I've been experiencing, and I needed to hear that. And I know this is gonna go on YouTube, but can I ask something off the records?
Sure. Let me just pause the
I
recording.
mean, you don't have to. We can just cut it out, if you want to put it out, I don't mind either. It's just for you. I
Sure.
remember at one point you were talking about the shadow work stuff that you've been getting and how you put that, I am enough sign there. I feel like that's a big theme in personal development because technically
Mhm.
we can always be better at sales, fitness, this, that in any area of life. So you putting that, was that also coming from that place?
Yeah, similar. Like you've probably heard the underground mentors say it, where on one hand, when you're in sales and you're going on to sales calls, you need to have the mindset of I'm amazing at sales. I'm really, really good at this. But at the same time, you have to have that mindset of like, I'm a beginner. I don't really know very much about sales. And what a lot of people struggle with, like the yo-yoing, is to realize that in any truth in life, there is a sweet spot where it's both sides. And if you push it too far one way or too far the other way, and you try and go to one thing or another thing, you won't make any progress because you're just going to yo-yo from the extremes. The real truth is, I am enough, but I'm also not enough. And that's the juxtaposition. That's the irony of any truth in life. It's like, is dieting good? Well, it is good, but it's also bad. It depends where you are in the sweet spot. And so that's why the way to analyze something is always looking at the second order consequences or the third order consequences. In other words, when you said, I'm being harsh on myself, my immediate thought is, well, what's the outcome? Are you doing more training or are you doing less training? Are you showing up to your training with a better state or a worse state? What I care about is the consequences of that thing. So many people don't make progress because they tell themselves they're good enough. Well, that's why they don't make any progress, because they tell themselves, "Oh, I'm fine. I don't need to get better. I don't need to be humble. I don't need to learn anything." At the same time, there are a lot of people that have opportunity in front of them, training, mentorship, community, and they don't do anything with it because they're beating themselves up all the time, saying, I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. I'm not meant to be here. I don't know what I'm doing, etc., etc. And so real mastery of yourself, personal mastery, is that you need to be the one that is constantly aware of where you are on the pendulum, and then you can choose to bring yourself back to the other side. It's like, you probably don't know this, but if you fly an airplane, inside an airplane, one of the things that you're always doing is you're making sure that the temperature of the different things in the airplane, the oil, the fuel, doesn't go too high, but it also can't go too low. And to be a good pilot, you need two skills: awareness and the ability to move the temperature up and down by your different controls. And so it's the same with personal development. First of all, you need to have personal awareness. Where am I on the yo-yo? Am I too far one way or am I too far the other way? The second thing you need to be able to do is have tools or training or mentorship or community that allows you to move to the other direction and be able to move to the right amount of that direction. So long as you have those two skills, you'll be able to do anything with your personal development side of things. It's like the key skill of getting into good shape if you want to do a bodybuilding show or whatever, is only two things. Are you tracking how much weight you're putting on or losing accurately? And then if it's too much or too little, do you know how to change your diet to slow it down or speed it up? It's the same, but just with knowing your state, which is where are my emotions and where are my actions? Am I doing more training or am I doing less training at the moment? How am I showing up to that training in a better state or a worse state? And then once you've analyzed where you're at, which is data gathering in a sales call, you then need to be able to ask yourself the questions, which are the sales questions, the closing questions. What can I do differently? What would bring me back down on the being harsh on myself scale so that I'm now at a point where I'm on the sweet spot, I'm on the right line? So you need to develop those two skills, awareness and being able to move yourself back and forth however much is necessary on that scale of being harsh on yourself. So let me ask you a quick question. Let's say that you were being too harsh on yourself and you were just beating yourself up all the time emotionally. What would be one thing that you could do that you think would bring more love to yourself into your life? What would be one thing?
As in like on a personal level, right? This is just like for example, I decided, okay, you know what, all I've been doing is sales, sales, sales. So I used to take Spanish classes. So now I decided, okay, you know what, let me get back to it, just so I feel like I have other stuff that I'm like that I got going on.
Exactly. So the point is, so long as we have the awareness of where we're at on the scale, and then we have the ability to ask ourselves questions about what we could do to move where we are on the scale, we'll be able to think of things. That is why when I was taking 9 calls a day, I took on singing lessons. Because I was like, I think and I did exactly what you did. I was on the scale, pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself, making more money, more money, more money, more money. And then I hit a breaking point and I was like, oh, I've pushed it too far. I've gone too far in being harsh on myself, wanting to get to the next level, the next level, the next level. So then I was like, you know what? What could I do in my weekly schedule that's not going to affect my sales too much? It's not going to, take 10 hours a week. What would be something that's reasonable that I think would bring me back to a sweet spot? And I said, I'm going to do singing lessons. And the crazy thing, and this is another thing to be aware of, is it's an experiment. You are the human guinea pig of your life. So what I did is I pushed myself further and further and further and further and further until, like I said, I got to this breaking point and I passed over the breaking point. So then what I said is, okay, I'm going to take up singing lessons. And the first thing I did is I did 1 singing lesson a week. And what ended up happening is I went from this place where I'd passed the breaking point and I went back to probably about here. And I was like, okay, this is brilliant. I'm not past the breaking point anymore. I feel better. So then what I did a few months later is I said, you know what? This is going really well doing these singing lessons for holistically, for my sales, for my fulfillment. I feel good. You know what? I'm going to do 3 singing lessons a week. And I tried 3 singing lessons. And guess what happened? I went past breaking point again. I was like, oh, fuck, that's too much. So then I was like, okay, what about 2 times a week? And I changed it to 2 times and I was still past the breaking point. So I was like, okay, the solution was 1 time a week. And so the point is, it's always an experiment. You have to try different things. And just like a bodybuilder would try eating more carbs, eating less carbs, eating more protein, eating less protein, what they're constantly doing is measuring what are the results? Where are you at? Are you putting on weight? Are you losing weight? Are you putting on too much weight? Are you losing too much weight? And then they keep experimenting with things. And this is also how it's in psycho-cybernetics, how a rocket or a missile, actually, to be technical, how a missile finds its target. So if that's the target and that's the missile, what actually happens is the missile goes off in one direction and then it's got a tracking system inside the missile that says, no, 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 this is too far off the right direction. And so then the tracking system turns the missile back into a different direction. And then it says, no, 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 that's too far in this direction. We've gone too far this way. So then it turns it in this direction. And slowly but surely, what ends up happening is the missile ends up what's called trending, so averaging to the target. So what would happen is the missile would be up here and then down here. And then it would be here and then here. And then it would be here and here. And then it would be here and here. And then it would be here and here. And eventually it lands bang on the target. So in other words, it does this. It goes up here, down here, 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 until eventually it hits the target. Meaning what you're doing is you're trying to reduce the level of experimentation each time you do a new experiment. Does that make sense, Melek?
Yeah, it does.
And that's how you build personal development. You don't just make a decision and all of a sudden you go in the perfect direction and you hit the target. It doesn't work like that. You make a decision and it goes in the wrong direction. So you say, okay, I'll try this. And that also goes in the wrong direction. But as you build up experience, which comes from experiments, your experience teaches you how to get more accurate. And slowly but surely, you get more and more accurate until you hit the target. And that's what personal development is. It's a circling process of getting closer and closer and closer to accurate how you should be living your life.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And this has been super helpful, Josh. Like, it's insane. First minute of the call, I mentioned, okay, I have one technical issue, one internal issue. You brought up the internal one without even me saying. And then now you're referencing all of these like pilot examples, like full-on masterclass right on spot. Like, I truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Malik. Usually the external issue that we think we have is the internal issue. So that wasn't a coincidence. They're usually the same thing. Because remember the law of the mirror. They're just a reflection of the same things. What we see outside is what is going on inside.
Yeah, again, and it was, I guess, me rushing the process with my personal development, with my sales development, and also with my discovery too. Like I'm rushing the process and I don't get granular enough.
Yeah, and you said that the external reaction is your prospects, some of them are not buying on the one call close. Well, they're not buying on the one call close because you're rushing the process of your own personal development and the data gathering of the prospect, that they're pushing you away. They're saying, I love this boutique hotel thing. It seems great, but I'm not going to buy from you right now because you're trying to speed up the whole thing. Whereas if you slow down, you'll slow down to speed up. If you've ever heard that phrase before.
Wow, this is trippy, honestly. Anytime we see these examples of law of the mirror, it blows my mind. And now, like, I figure, okay, this is mine that I have to work on. It's going to
100%.
come out for me.
Awesome. Can I help you with anything else?
No, honestly, I feel like these were the two biggest unlocks that I have to work on for now.
Do you
Thank
feel
you
like you've got what you need?
Yeah, absolutely. And more than what I needed, honestly. Like even certain things you mentioned, for example, with me generalization, like that wasn't even me. I didn't even realize that I was doing that. I just thought, okay, like I'm being too harsh on myself. That's too bad. Let me just rest up.
And then,
Yeah.
and then all that will happen, like the person that's on a really harsh diet, and then they stop counting any calories and they just go and eat pizza, which is resting up, you just bounce back and you're just going on this pendulum back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You have to be more caring to yourself and realize if I'm going in the wrong direction, I just need to massage my routine and my lifestyle back to a center point, something that's more reasonable, not swing it all the way the other direction. Like, oh, you know, I've heard salespeople say this before. I got burned out, so I took a month off sales. That's not going to fix it. Now you're going to come back to sales a month later in scarcity, being like, shit, I've made no money. I've kind of forgotten how to sell. I need to build my momentum again. That's not the solution. That's just yo-yo dieting as a salesperson. You don't want to do that. You want to be much more. It's like the other day I was going to do a pottery class. I had to cancel it actually. I had a call, but I was going to do a pottery class. And one of the things I remember when I did a pottery class in the past was you have to be so delicate when you're building the vase or the cup or whatever you're building. Because if you manhandle the clay, it will just fall apart. And it's the same with your lifestyle. You've got to be much more gentle with yourself, okay? Don't swing all the way to one direction and don't swing all the way to the other direction. But as I drew on the whiteboard, in the beginning, you are going to be very harsh on yourself and very extreme because when you're first building experience, you're going to take these massive swings in opposite directions. And that's how you realize what the boundaries are of too high, as we've called it, and too low. But as you realize what those upper and lower boundaries are, your boundaries will get closer together and closer together and closer together and closer together until eventually you're never, if we drew it as a pendulum, you're really only going from here to here. You never really go anywhere. Or there is one caveat. If you swing the pendulum, it's conscious. Like the person I know that's obviously the best at this is the underground mentor. He never swings the pendulum more than like 1 degree either direction. But there are times where he'll be really intense with me, but it's controlled, it's conscious. It's not he got frustrated or he got angry. He's choosing to demonstrate anger to prove a point, to demonstrate something to me. And so the key thing with the pendulum is to remember that most of this is unconscious. You have to make it conscious. That's what personal development means, is turning the unconscious conscious. That's if there were ever a simple definition of personal development, it is turning the unconscious conscious. That's what personal development is. Everything that you're screwing up in life is because you're doing things without awareness over them. As you bring your awareness to everything, you'll stop screwing them up. That's what personal development is.
Like as in, for example, I'm being reactive right now, right? Oh, I'm burnt out. Let me rest up. It was not like I didn't actually intend to be this way, but it's just I'm being reactive and unconscious.
Yeah. Even getting to burnout was unconscious. Like as you start doing more experience with yourself and you start building more self-awareness of what your limits are and what pushes you one direction and what pushes you the other, you might decide one day, I'm going to go on a push to make as much money as possible. But you now have the awareness of what your limits are, which means as you push and push and push and push, you will know that the burnout is coming. It will be predictable. Whereas what you've had is an unpredictable burnout that just appeared. You're like, fuck, where did that come from? And that's because it was unconscious. As you build up more awareness of yourself, you know what's going to happen. It's like you become a crystal ball. You can see the future because you've been there before. First, you have to swing the pendulum as far as you can to know, okay, that was too much, that was too little. Next time, I'm going to try this and this. Then I'm going to try this and this. And then if you consciously decided, I'm going to do a make money season and I'm going to swing the pendulum to pushing myself as hard as I can, as you're pushing, you know, okay, I've probably got 3 weeks left before I'm going to hit burnout. You're aware of it. And the crazy thing as well with things like burnout is a big part of why the burnout freaks us out is because we didn't know it was coming. If you know in 3 weeks, I'm going to be absolutely exhausted, I'm going to be completely burned out, you'll get to that 3 weeks and you won't panic. You'll just go, okay, I'm just going to go to the spa. I'm just going to go for a massage. You won't panic about it because it was predictable. You knew it was coming.
Yeah,
Make sense?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I
It's
appreciate
my
you.
pleasure, Malik. My pleasure. Do you need anything else?
No, I'm all good. See you next
Awesome.
week.
I'll see you next week in Cabo. See you soon, Malik.
Cheers.
Bye.